Welcome back to Close Up. He's been a declared candidate in the 2026 race for governor longer than anyone else. There was a brief stint there as an independent, but now John Kiper is back in the fold as a Democrat, and he's likely to gain some primary competition in the weeks ahead. But he's had a head start and some reason for optimism in recent polling. Mr. Kiper is our guest this morning on Close Up. John, thanks for coming in.
Hey, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
So you've been very forthright as kind of almost the skeptic in chief, being like, man, this is going to be a tough race against Kelly Ayotte no matter what. But now this UNH poll comes out, and it shows you just down 11 points. So is there some Kipe-mentum going on here? What's happening?
Yeah, I have got to say I was as surprised as anyone at that poll. It's great. You know, I think it's clear that my message is getting through, that people really want change, and they want change not only in the governor's race, in the governor's seat, but also in the Democratic Party. I think they're looking for new leadership and looking for someone that's going to take the party in a new direction and win. And we're going to win in 2026, and I will be the governor.
Do you think it's really that close?
What do you mean?
11 points.
Oh, yeah, we got plenty of time. We got plenty of time. I think what's going to happen between now and then, this is my prediction, the economy is going to continue to shrink under Donald Trump, and I think that Kelly Ayotte is going to really have no answers for the questions of the Granite Staters, such as how are you going to lower my property taxes? How are you going to build affordable housing? And how are you going to fund our education system, particularly property taxes? I mean, it's funny. The Republicans just have no answer on that question aside from blame your local budget committee, blame your local city council. And frankly, I think we've all learned that that is just not that's not their fault. You know, it's the fault of the Republicans in Concord who continue to cut taxes for the wealthy, cut taxes for corporations. And, you know, the reality is they're playing out trickle-down economics, and that system doesn't work. It hasn't worked for the last 40 years, and it's not going to work today.
Does anything change about how you operate if and when, and probably when, you get a primary opponent? As you've pointed out, it's not like the Democratic establishment has had a great record of winning this last decade, but what do you do differently when you get an opponent?
You know, it really depends on who it is and how I frame myself against them. It's definitely frustrating because, you know, last time Joyce Craig and Cindy Wormington started 16 months ahead, right, in a race where it was an open seat. And now you've got Kelly Ayotte, statistically going to win a second term based on the past. And I don't know what logic there is to waiting to enter the race. I mean, it kind of cracks me up that these people sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, I might run. Okay, run. If you're going to run, do it. Why didn't you do it yesterday? Why didn't you do it last year or last week or whatever? You know, why didn't you start when people usually start running for governor? Like this idea that there's a tactic, you're going to just surprise Kelly Ayotte in June. I think that they're basically waiting for her numbers to go to 20 or something, and it's not going to happen. So I say to these people, you know, come out, let's do the primary, let's have it out, and then we can distinguish ourselves and we can, you know, show the Democratic people what kind of governors we're going to be.
You deserve some credit in 2024 for kind of predicting what would happen on that Granite State debate stage. You said Joyce is going to be way too saddled by the Manchester stuff, and then you predicted that Cindy Wormington would face difficulty over her past work for Purdue Pharma. Never got to test that hypothesis in a general election, but if she ends up being your opponent in the primary, how aggressively do you pursue that line of attack in terms of her past work and the opioid crisis?
You know, I really do not want to have that fight out again. It was not fun, frankly. I don't like attacking Democrats. I really don't like doing that. I don't like to hurt the party. And I think if Cindy Wormington was going to run, I think she would have right now. I think that the fact that she did not show up in that poll that came out is proof that I think she's done the testing. I think she's run her own polls, and I think the reality is people don't want Cindy Wormington for governor.
You mentioned, you know, Kelly Ayotte and how she's handled things over the last year politically. You know, New Hampshire's demographics could be sort of what's at play if that poll from UNH is accurate. We see older, more educated, more affluent voters moving away from Trump the fastest, and obviously New Hampshire has a lot of those. Do you think a Democrat can make this a close race just by saying, I will stand up to Trump?
I think that's just part of it. You know, I'm really focused on New Hampshire. I think, too, one of the downsides of Trump being on the scene is that he nationalizes every issue, and people are just looking at D.C. And I try to tell people, look, let's just focus on our own state. Let's focus on what's happening in Concord. like the rest of the country can worry about the rest of the country. If we focus on New Hampshire and our problems, which are property taxes, affordable housing, funding education, if we focus on these issues, we can really get results in our state. And I'm not worried, or I'm not going to stress about what's happening in the rest of the country. I'm going to focus on New Hampshire.
And yet what's happening in the rest of the country, a lot of Democratic voters want to know, what would John Kuiper do as governor in relation to immigration and customs enforcement, ICE?
Yeah, it's tough. The governor has no authority over immigration. I think it's really important for people to understand that. That said, what ICE is doing, I think, is really abysmal. I mean, it flies in the face of so many constitutional rights that we have. I mean, just the idea of masked people going around, dragging people in the streets, literally shooting American citizens is so shocking to even just the average person that I think the population is turning on ICE's approach to immigration. And I think that, today there's a lot of people going on strike. I think you're going to see more of that. I think that, the one way to get at the Trump administration seems to be the economy, the stock market, the bond market. That seems to be the only thing that makes them flinch, with like Greenland and some of these other things that they've gotten into. So I think it's really important that people recognize what's happening and that they're violating the Constitution in many ways. And I think that the founders of this country would not be happy with what's happening with ICE.
Do you support these calls to abolish ICE?
I think the problem is if we abolish ICE, what comes after it? The Democrats need a comprehensive immigration plan. It's so frustrating to me that people say abolish ICE. Okay, well, let's say we get rid of ICE, and then a Republican gets elected in somewhere in the 2030s and just recreates ICE, and then we go through this again. Like, we need solutions. Ronald Reagan, he oversaw 2.7 million people becoming U.S. Residents who had been undocumented because he understood the reality, and this is the reality. These people are here, they don't have permission to work, but they have become integral in our communities, they've become integral in our economy. They're doing jobs frequently that a lot of Americans just don't want to do in construction, in agriculture, in food production, and these people are essential not just for our communities, but literally to keep food on our tables. It just makes no sense to me at a time we have a housing crisis to open the news and read about, 8 roofers from Methuen, Mass getting deported. I'm like, we need those guys right here. So the system is fundamentally broken, and I don't want a Band-Aid solution. I want to know what's the next plan that's going to get us through the next 20, 30 years.
And so I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, but what you're saying is, we've seen this playbook before. Trump enrages Democrats.
Yeah.
They, instead of claiming the big middle where you win elections, they run hard to the left on some of these issues. You're worried that could be happening again.
Well, it's more that I just want to know what the plan is. You know what I mean? I want to know that there's a long-term solution for immigration that is going to appease both people on the right who want our laws enforced, which I fully understand, and people on the left who recognize that whether you like it or not, these people have become part of our communities and part of our economy, and we really need a solution to that.
You made this big push going to court to increase state lawmaker pay. Everything about you is this, working guy vibe. Like you don't wear the suits, you don't play the games, all any of that stuff. Isn't it a little weird to take the position of, hey, we need to pay more money to our politicians?
So the reality is that we have got a legislature that is predominantly made up of people that are retired and people that are wealthy, and that's just really not democracy. And I'm not talking about paying hundreds of thousands of dollars or anything like that. We're talking about a small amount, $10,000. I was just reading through the notes, the Journal of the New Hampshire Constitution from 1889 when they set the amount at $100. And it's really interesting because previous to that, they were getting $3 a day, right? Which is equal to about $100 a day, which I think would be a fine amount for a state rep to receive $100 per day. And this is what's so funny. So they limited it. They said, this one guy said, hey, we should cap it at $100 because at the time the session was only 8 weeks. And he was basically saying, if we pay ourselves per day, there's people here that are going to stretch out the session to get paid more. And he was like, I got to get home to get back to work. Like, I can't be here for longer than 8 weeks. So if we cap the amount, it will limit how long we're here, right? Which it makes a lot of sense. It's actually a really good idea. But the problem is when they extended the amount of work that the legislature was doing, when they made it 2 years and then extended it to now it's 6 months, if even longer, they did not change the compensation. So really, it's a miscommunication between the people that wrote that part of the Constitution and later legislators who did not update the compensation to align with what was the intended purpose of that law and that constitutional change in 1889.
I want to sneak in one more question
Sure.
here before we wrap up. Obviously, right now, people are thinking a lot about their home heating bills. It's very expensive, especially it gets super cold. What's the Kuiper plan to lower people's energy costs when you're governor?
You know, we've really got to look at renewable energy. You know, we should have solar panels on every state and municipal-owned building in our state. And, you know, Australia is doing a lot of great work with batteries to back up the grid, because really what we want to get to is a decentralized grid where when we have a storm or something like that, we can, you know, have power in houses and not worry about this bigger grid that could potentially have problems.
All right. John Kuiper, thanks for joining us on Close Up. We always appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, the request Governor Kelly Ayotte made to the White House regarding the possibility of an immigrant detention facility coming to Merrimack.